What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Hope everyone is having a good night. Tonight we got a special guest, Officer Tatum. He is it's ex-police officer, right?
Yep.
Okay. And you were SWAT as well?
Yep.
And he's a professional speaker, has a large YouTube channel, and you were doing stuff with Shapiro for a while too, right?
Yeah, I jumped around, man. Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro, Candace Owens, we a lot of those people in the same circle. So I did a lot of work with just about everybody.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, hey guys, we're going to keep this really respectful. We just want to kind of have a conversation about this Uvalde thing. Obviously, if you've watched both of our videos, we've definitely been on the, I don't want to say the opposite side, but definitely have a difference of opinion. So we're just going to kind of talk about it a little bit. So let me start and ask you this. So I know that you are a obviously strong supporter of police, and I haven't obviously watched every single one of your videos, but is there ever a time where you're able to look at the situation and say, you know what, they really messed that up, and kind of talk on that?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of videos that I've done. My critique of police is balancing my critique, but I focus more on disproving the myths that are out there in the public. So if cops are doing bad things and they get held accountable, I typically don't make videos about those. It's not because I don't want cops to be held accountable. It's just that my priorities are fighting against the mainstream media and narratives that are not true. I made plenty of videos about police officers doing bad conduct. Kim Potter, I spoke about her, shooting
Right.
Dante Wright with a gun instead of the taser, which I thought was deplorable. Laquan McDonald was shot 12 times by a police officer, and I thought that was unjustified. I rightly predicted that he would get charged with second-degree murder. So, I go down the list, and even some situations where I support cops, I acknowledge when they need improvement, given my training and experience. And the Uvalde thing is really no different. I think people may take some of the things I say out of context. In no way, form, or fashion, after reviewing after the fact, it's no way that anybody with common sense will say that they did it perfectly. They did exactly what they were trained to do, and everything is kosher. I think my whole argument is that I think in our critiques of the Uvalde Police Department is, in hindsight, at least that's my opinion of it, not necessarily what they expected and what they saw while they were there, for the most part.
Gotcha. Okay. So I know, I think it was in one of the first videos you made, you said that you had firsthand knowledge. Is that, was that a police officer that was inside that hallway, or someone inside the hallway, or how? I'm just curious on what
I'm trying not to burn my person, but yeah.
Well, you don't have to say his name or anything like that.
I was getting intel from somebody who was it wasn't a person at the beginning. The person that came a little bit later was in the hallway, breached the room, and was inside. So,
yeah, no, I gotcha. So let me ask you. I mean, obviously, in a situation like this, I'm sure a lot of adrenaline's going through your system. Is it possible that maybe some of the information he told you is not correct, and or do you think he's possibly fabricating some of the story to ultimately save his ass? Because I don't know where this thing's going with. I don't know if they're filing charges against the chief, or if it's even going to go that far. I have my own opinion on that. But do you think it's possible that this guy or whoever it was is not factually correct on everything he told you?
Yeah, I think it's possible. Obviously, I've done this for a living, and I understand that some people, they call it the haze of war, or whatever, the fog of war. Sometimes things can be not remembered properly, and that's totally fine. And after looking at everything that I've looked at, I think that the guy who gave me intel was like 99% correct on everything he told me, which was verified by many different sources. I think there was a few nuanced details that I understand when the stuff hit the fan and shots are being fired, that the small nuances may be a little off.
Gotcha. Okay.
I'll just say this. I think the only thing that he got wrong was the door situation. I think he interpreted that they used the Halligan, but the Halligan wasn't used. The key was used on a door. Everything else was pretty accurate.
See, and that's the thing that I'm really confused about. So Chief Arredondo did the interview with Texas Tribune, and he said they were trying different keys for 77 minutes, and he was praying that one would work. That's whatever they put in the article. And then the DPS director did his whole thing and said that a key wasn't even needed. So is that a cover up? Is that a I mean, it's just that doesn't make any sense.
Well, let me speak to that real quick. He's saying a key isn't needed in hindsight, right? At the time, nobody knew that the door was not functioning properly. According to the protocol at the school, every door is supposed to be locked. None of those doors are supposed to be open. They cannot lock from the inside, so they're supposed to be set to the lock mechanism setting. They were all locked. However, this particular door, the door jamb with the you say where the I'm trying to think of the name of it. The door jamb where the strike plate is, where the throw goes through, right? Where you push the door shut and the throw goes right through the strike plate into the door frame. That wasn't lined up properly, and it had the propensity to malfunction, meaning that it wasn't secure. That's not something that they knew at the time. I think people can argue should they have tried the door or not, but it's the DPS director was saying they never needed the key. In hindsight, nobody thought of that or thought that they didn't need a key when they were there. That's why Arredondo was trying for keys, and that's why ultimately the BORTAC unit actually used the key to open the door.
Yeah, it's just really confusing because I'm picturing a door, and if you were able to put a key in the door, you're able to twist the knob and see if it's open or not. I'm just that part just doesn't make any sense. So what you're saying is that they're supposed to be locked and they just didn't try to see if it was unlocked, and they just kind of were.
Well, so the way it was is that from all the information that I have, it's that they perceived that it was locked. Arredondo is perceiving that it's locked. It's the way the school is supposed to be. All the other doors were locked, and he was trying a master key on other doors so that they can have the proper key to breach. And I'm not justifying what he did or not. I'm just giving the facts. And so it appears that they believed that the door was locked. They used the key. And when the BORTAC team went to the door, they just simply put the key in and they set it to the unlock setting before they opened the door. So they never actually pulled on the door. And the door wasn't so floppy that it just came open when they began to put the key in. So it had a level of security. Now, let me say this. Let me clarify this. When you look at let me ask you this question. Did you watch the entire hearing?
I watched a lot of it. It's starting to piss me off, honestly, so I had to shut it off.
So a lot of this information is crucial because it was a 4.5 hour, a little bit over 4.5 hour hearing. Senators were asking questions, and a lot of this stuff was covered. So they weren't able to determine for a fact that the door was actually open. They believed that it was open because the shooter went in and out the door twice. The door did not have a lock malfunction. They just believed, based on the shooter, that the door may not have latched and was shut, but they could not prove unequivocally because nobody tried the door. Even when BORTAC went in, they never tried the door. So they don't know if it was actually locked. They have no unequivocal evidence if it was locked or not. They derived the fact that the key may have never been needed, given the fact that on camera they could see the shooter going in and out the classroom. When, according to his testimony, the door could lock. It's just that the door wasn't. It was difficult to secure the throw into the door jamb. So people are coming up with this idea, but it's not even unequivocal that the door was unlocked. And I think that was a fault of the DPS director by even saying that.
Yeah, I don't know if we can really complicate it that much. I mean, in my opinion, it's a door. Like when a robber goes into a house, most of the time they're going to go and check if it's unlocked before they kick the door in and make a bunch of noise. The part that I'm not getting is how are you not checking to see if you don't need to just shoot it off its hinges or slam it in? How are you just not checking and seeing if that's going to work? I really don't see a way that can be any sort of argument for the cops. I mean, doesn't make any sense.
Well, I think it's two sides to it, right? I mean, you have
Mhm.
a expectation that maybe they could have tried the door before, but then the alternative side to it is that there people that are getting to the door is getting confirmation for Arredondo that the door is locked. He's saying the door is locked. So what I'm saying is that the people who are
Yeah,
going to pursue the door, try the door, is listening to a person who's telling them the door is locked for sure. And that's why
I
when the
get that.
tactical team showed up, they believed that they needed to either breach the door with explosive breach, they need to breach it with the Halligan, or they need to use a key. So now, if somebody actually checked the door originally, they would have known it was unlocked, and nobody would have perceived that, and it would have been kosher. But when they were being told
Right.
that the door is locked, it's not. To me, it's not reasonable for them to go up and say, "Let's risk getting killed to just try a door that somebody is saying they confirmed that it's locked." That's
Mhm.
that's that's kind of makes sense to why I believe they didn't do it.
Well, it sounds like from what I've read, from what I've seen, from what I've watched as far as the DPS director goes, it sounds like this Chief Arredondo just completely shit the bed on this entire thing. I mean, if you're explaining to your team in the hallway that the door is locked, I mean, how do you come to that conclusion if it truly is unlocked if you don't try the door? Like, is he guessing? Like, I would imagine that a shooter in a classroom is going in there would lock the door behind him to somewhat barricade himself. But I just don't know how you can just radio in once he got his damn radio and say, "Hey, the door's locked."
Well, this is what actually happened according to DPS investigation is that he didn't have a radio. His radio
Mhm.
wouldn't have worked in the hallway. According to the
Mm.
investigation, no police officer's radio worked in the hallway. DPS wouldn't work. Uvalde ISD, Uvalde PD, the county, nor DPS radios will work in that particular hallway. It didn't have a strong enough signal. So even
What
when
kind of
Border Patrol,
radios did they have? That's a
yeah,
joke.
they had a radio, but the signal wasn't strong enough. Border Patrol was the only unit that radios would work in the hallway, but once they patched Border Patrol in with Uvalde ISD PD or Uvalde PD, their radios didn't work. So radios were not able to function in the hallway. So Arredondo, knowing this, I think because he had personal experience, he actually communicated solely with his cell phone. And so they have a
Mm.
cell phone transcript record of Arredondo calling dispatch and then having this dialogue with dispatch without his radio. And so that was the only way he was able to communicate. So the entire time during the incident, nobody was able to adequately communicate outside of the hallway. Some people were able to go back and forth, but when dispatch would dispatch things, they didn't get that information. Probably a lot of that information in the hallway because they weren't getting a radio signal.
Gotcha. Okay. So here's kind of the major point that I think a lot of people are upset about, and I definitely kind of boils my blood a little bit. So ultimately, this situation calls for two options. It's either the kids wait or the police wait, and that's really what happened. Is whether or not they had the right plan, the right orders, the right tactics, the right gear, the right guns, the right whatever. If you boil it down to its simplicity, it's simply, are you going to let the kids wait for however long it was? I've heard a million different things on how many minutes it was. It was quite a while. Or are you just going to say, screw it? We don't have a plan, but these are kids. We're just going to go in there. And if we lose a guy, we lose a guy. But this dude who's untrained, who's 18, who probably, you know, has never had any sort of tactical training is not going to take out 9 guys if we just go and storm it.
So this is and I agree with you 1,000%, but this is the problem that I think a lot of people are missing. The question is, who knew that the kids were in the room? According to the DPS director,
It's a classroom.
No. Listen, hear me out.
Okay.
According to the DPS director, he said that he is 100% confident that every single person in that hallway would have gone in without hesitation if they knew that there were kids in the classroom. Now, here is the part that's interesting, and we don't have the answer to this. Who knew that there were kids in the classroom? Because at the beginning, to me, it seems as if the first responders that responded to the scene should have known that there were kids in the classroom and that shooting was going on. DPS director didn't make that connection, but the people who showed up after this wave of shooting, when the rest of the agencies were showing up, there's no evidence that they even knew that kids were in there initially. And,
well, let me ask you
this
this.
Is not my opinion. This is the DPS director in the hearing, and even the kids that were calling in. He said in the hearing, and one of the senators pressed him on it. They said, when the kids were calling in, how was that translated to the people inside the room? The DPS director said their evidence or their investigation have yielded that only one person knew that a kid was calling in, and they have no evidence that that information got to anybody inside the building.
Well,
now you got to think too that there was no shooting going on for an extended period of time. You had the shooting 100 rounds at the beginning, shooting in 3 bursts, and then from about 11:40 all the way through 12:20, there was no shooting and no action in its entirety.
Well, here's my rebuttal on that. So it's 11, 12 o'clock on a weekday. Where is your human logic if you're in that situation saying, okay, it's 11 or 12 on a weekday. It's not a holiday. It's, kids are in school. So they're somewhere. We didn't get all of them out. We didn't evacuate this entire school. So if they didn't know there were kids there, I would say, where is your logic? 2, it would be, if there is no shooting going on, why are you not clearing rooms and moving throughout the school to try to figure out if there are kids in there? I don't understand the logic behind, well, we didn't get a call saying that there are kids. It's, well, we better be damn sure to make sure there aren't kids. That's my...
And I think you're 100% correct. However, I think the part that's missing is that you weren't there, right? And I wasn't there. So let me just add a couple parts in here. Every kid on the north side of where this shooting occurred, all those kids were vacant out of the classroom because during 12 o'clock they were in the cafeteria for lunch. So I don't know why they did what they did, but I could presume to a certain degree that potentially this is an idea, because we don't really know. They haven't come out and given us testimony from any of the officers. We don't know what they saw, what they thought, what they were doing. But with all the kids being vacant in the northern classes, and it was like 6 or 7 classes, maybe the ones who showed up were thinking, okay, no kids are in the classrooms on the north side when they went through the west door. And then when they went down the hall, it was complete silence, no shooting, no screaming, no nothing. And they may have perceived that there was nobody in the classroom. I think at some point, here's the dilemma. I think there's 2 factions that we have to separate here. And a lot of people may not be able to do that if they don't have all the information. There's the initial responding officers, and then there's the officers who subsequently responded. These are 2 different sections of officers. The officers that initially responded had a complete different experience. And I don't think they translated that very well to the officers who were responding, because,
I just don't.
I'm under the impression. Go ahead.
How much experience do you need, though, or training or any of that, when you know that kids are being shot? Like, where
did they know that the kids were being shot?
Well, it's a school, and there's a reported gunman in the school. If you don't have confirmation that the dude's dead, I mean, the training manual that they went through, I don't know when it was, how many months before, it's very clear. We don't care if you're by yourself. You go and you eliminate the threat. You're not breaking windows and getting kids out of windows. You're not doing crowd control. You're not doing any of that. You go and you eliminate the threat. So unless you have hey, this dude is dead, we can start kind of figuring out what we're doing here. I just don't. it just doesn't make that much sense as far as, well, I don't know how to go into this hallway in the perfect tactical manner. It's run in there and get the kids out.
I think this is what people are missing, and this is what I think is missing from the conversation, is that who perceived it as an active shooter situation is the question. According to the DPS director, he made mention that everybody in the hallway would have gone in the classroom if they had known the children were in the classroom. When you look at the response from all the responding officers, you look at the dialogue from all of the police radios, you see that not one person there perceived this as an active shooter. They were.
But what are you doing? But what are you doing at that point?
Right. So this is what I agree with you 1,000%. But this is where the missing gap come in, that we don't know because they're not explaining this to us. It makes sense to me if they didn't know that there was kids in the classroom. Responding officers get to the scene and they're told this is a barricaded subject. They don't have any stimuli. There's no shooting going on. It's completely silent. So they don't know. The people that came before them, Arredondo and all of them, they should have known. But the people showing up, if this wasn't translated to them, they may not have known. And therefore, you see methodically, and this is something I want people to understand, methodically, every officer that showed up treated this like a barricaded subject. All the BORTAC, which is the most tactical team in the United States of America domestically, is BORTAC. They're the baddest dudes in America. They treated it like a barricaded subject. Now, this is what I want people to consider. If you don't know that children are in the school because you have a reason to believe that they're not,
what is that reason?
When you show up to the scene and somebody's telling you it's a barricaded subject, right? Because Arredondo
does that mean that the kids are not barricaded with him, though?
But this is the thing. Let's go through two scenarios, right?
Okay.
In tactical training, there's a difference between a barricaded subject and an active shooter. There's a potential that there could be a barricaded subject in a school, right? And let me explain the difference to the audience. If you go to a school and there's a report of a shooting in the school, and it's actively the person is shooting in the school, that person is an active shooter, and they never cease to be an active shooter. Even if they stop shooting, even if they barricade themselves, they are an active shooter 100% of the time. Now, the converse, if you have a person that enter into the school and they haven't shot anybody and they're barricading themselves in a room with children, then you have another playing field, right? Because that could be considered a barricaded subject. If the person is willing to negotiate, you may want to attempt to negotiate with the person and not provoke them to start executing kids. Those are two different scenarios. In my opinion, based on what I've seen, it appears that the initial officers were wrong in diagnosing this as a barricaded situation. They set the precedent that every other officer that showed up were thinking that this guy is barricaded. They had no reference point that the shooting had even occurred, because by the time a lot of the officers were responding, it was after the shooting had occurred and it was complete silence. And so this is what I'm getting from information that I have, exclusive information that I have, and also from the investigation. So we have two different things here. Like, do I think that the response in hindsight was wrong? Yes. Now we know that there was kids in there dead. Now we know that kids were calling in. At the time, I don't know if the majority of the officers knew what Arredondo and his officers knew at the very beginning.
Yeah, it just sounds like a total cluster as far as communication goes.
It was.
Regardless, I mean, if you're not 100% sure that there's not kids in there, I mean, I just don't see any reason to just, be outside or to wait until you just have confirmation that the dude is gone or dead. Let me ask you this. So
I agree. I want you to know I agree with you 1,000%.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
So let me ask you this. If you were in this situation, you were one of the parents who lost a kid, what would be your critique for the police officers with the information you know now? What do you think they messed up on?
Yeah, I think that my critique would be dual-sided, right? My biggest critique would be on the school for not being locked down. leaving the doors open, which subsequently resulted in probably 99% of the kids being killed before the cops got there. So I would be upset with the school that they didn't secure the doors, that they allow a killer to come in, even in a case of a lockdown. Because if you look at it, they never locked the school down. It was impossible to lock down. It was a myth. It's a phantom lockdown. They never had the structure in place to actually protect the kids. So I would be very upset with the school. And then I would be very upset with the first responders that responded to the school and did not diagnose this as an active shooter for whatever reason. I don't know if they started as an active shooter, then they changed it. I don't know what they were doing, but the first responders that got there and did not diagnose this properly, I would be very upset with them, and I would hold the ones who knew accountable for whatever subsequent loss of life happened after they responded. Because I don't care what training you have, you at least, if you get to a door and it's an active shooter situation and you're unable to breach the door, you need to communicate that to every single person that's coming into the hallway, because as you see people coming in with shields and stuff like that, they need to know that this is not a barricade. This is an active situation. And therefore, we probably would have seen a different response, which some people may agree with me or not. The DPS director said that every man in that hallway would have responded and would have gone into school without hesitation if they knew the kids were in there.
There's no way that can be proven as a fact, because you're basing that off of human instinct. It's just not a fact. You would like to think that. We would like to think that, but it's just not. You can't say they would have absolutely done that. It's just not. It's based on human instinct and human emotion, and if you're scared, if you're willing to do that type of thing.
Let me tell you where I think he got this from. Real quick, let me tell you where I think he got this from. And they're not releasing this, and I'm telling people that's in the crowd to listen to me clearly. If I had to make an assumption where he may have got this from, is that he's interviewed the officers who were in the hallway. He's interviewed them. So I believe he knows that they didn't believe that there were kids in the classroom. He knows that
that's just a terrible thing. They should shut up about that, honestly, because if that gets out, that they're saying like, hey, we just didn't know there were kids in the classrooms, people are going to lose it. I mean, that's
irrational.
Any way you frame it.
Right.
As far as, well, we didn't have the radio, or we didn't have confirmation there was kids, or we weren't sure, any of that. It's kids, it's a school, it's 12 o'clock on a weekday. Like, there is literally nothing you can, or the DPS or whatever. There's just no, I mean, I get what you're saying, and I get that they may have thought something, but there's still absolutely no excuse for it.
Well, let me give you this. The public will never understand, and I understand that. The public will never understand how they did or did not interpret things, because the public don't understand. They weren't there. Now, what I'm explaining is that who's going to be held accountable. So if there's a determination that the officers that were in there with shields ready to go, they were in there, Bortak was in there ready to go, and they can determine that there was not enough information for them at the time, or none of the information was translated to them that there were actually kids in there, given the fact that the initial briefing that they got with this was that this guy was a barricaded person, they're not going to get in trouble. The public is going to feel a certain way, but they're not going to get in trouble for it.
How much, I get what you're saying, but how much info, like if your kid was in there, not shot, nothing, he's just in there with the guy, how much info do you need to get your ass in there? Like, it's,
let me say this. If my kid was in there, that's a different story. But if I didn't,
but you can't be biased though, because these are children of other parents.
If I knew, this is what I'm saying. I'm telling you, this is gonna be revealed, I believe. If I knew my children were in there, we're talking about something different. If I didn't believe that my child was in there, I'm going to react differently. Not just
how do you make that judgment call? How do you make that judgment call, though, if you don't have confirmation that your kid is out?
Well, if you show up, let me give you an example. If you show up to a scene, well, I don't know about your kid. I mean, because I don't know if I think one guy may have had a kid in there. I don't know. But if you show up to a scene, right? Let me just give you a scenario. You get the call that there's been a shooting at Robb Elementary, right? Now you don't know what that means. You don't know if it's a shooting in the parking lot. You don't know if it's between two students. You don't know what that means. You respond from another location. You show up on scene and there's no shooting. And you get there and people are telling you and they're posturing as if this is a barricaded subject. And you say, I don't hear any shooting. I don't hear any noise. I'm assuming that the people that are already here have made the proper determination. There's no shooting. There's no noise. There's nothing. I'm going to perceive that this is a barricaded subject. Now, when you're a police officer and you know scenarios, you know that there could be a situation where a person got into a school and barricaded themselves outside of a location where the children were at. These things happen, like a crash and a person running into a school to escape police officers and hiding in the classroom that's empty. That could be a scenario. So if that scenario is your scenario, then maybe you won't go in. I'll make this point, and I want people to consider this. Do you think that there were 10, 15 men in a hallway listening to kids get killed? I'm talking about DPS, sheriff, police, U.S. Marshal, BORTAC. Do people really think, and I'm saying they have to jog their memory, do you think that they were listening to kids getting shot and they had shields, they had rifles, the baddest tactical team in the United States of America? You think they were listening to kids getting killed and they stood there? That's the question that I pose to people who are listening, is that, do you think that that's what happened?
I have a different question I'll pose. After the first 100 shots in the whole cluster of not knowing if he's barricaded or not, not knowing if there are kids in the school somehow, whatever process that is, not knowing if the door is unlocked, could more kids have been saved if it wasn't such a cluster and if they just went in, started clearing rooms? Who gives a shit if it's a barricaded suspect? I got parents out here whose kids are still in there. I mean, there had to have been some sort of communication from the parents outside and those officers to the people inside, like, hey, we got parents out here thinking that their kid is in there. Like, can we get some sort of confirmation that they're out?
Let me bring this to your attention, because I think a lot of people don't know this either. There was over 500 kids and staff rescued from or evacuated from the Uvalde school that day. So there was a lot of chaos going on. There was a lot of people that may say, my kids are in the school, but it's impossible for them to translate that properly, because and this is another complication that was outside of the police control, was that even if the parents told somebody out there, how could they get that accurate information into the school? They couldn't use the radio because the radios wouldn't work in the hallway. And so that information was being lost in translation. Now, even if a person said, my kid is in that classroom, there is no way for them to prove that or disprove that in this chaotic situation, right? Because some people's kids were rescued and they were taken to the funeral home. They were rescued to the parental rescue site, which is where they allotted for parents to meet their children. So it was chaotic, man. And I think that people may not understand how chaotic this could have been. And while it's not easy to translate that very well, I know that parents were upset. I would have been upset if my kid is in that school. But as a former police officer, I understand that they can't just let me run to the school, right? Because I get that part. And I also get why the parents are upset. So, but you got to draw the line somewhere and say the police had to protect the parents from going into the school. They had to protect the children to keep them locked down in certain areas, because they can't just release a bunch of kids and the kids run to where the shooter's at or get caught in the crossfire. So all of this had to be methodically controlled, and it was chaotic, man. They could not communicate on the radio. They were bonking each other, 5 or 6, 7 agencies, some federal, some local, some county, some state, and they're all not on the same dispatch. So I'm not saying that's an excuse for anything. I'm just trying to paint the picture of what kind of chaotic situation was happening. It wasn't just cops sitting there with their thumbs like
Yeah.
this, waiting for 77 minutes. It was a bunch of chaotic stuff happening for a prolonged period of time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody's arguing that it wasn't a chaotic situation. What do you think about the guy who tried to go in? I think he was Uvalde ISD, and they detained him. I think he was the guy who had his wife there who later died, but detained him, took his gun from him. At that point, I mean, where's the logic in that, one? And two, how does that even happen? It's like, hey, we're not going in yet. You can't have a gun, or we're just going to detain you. Like, how do you?
So none of us were there, and so we don't know exactly what happened. Now I'm gonna give two scenarios at what could have happened. The first scenario is a scenario of a man showing up to the scene because, according to the DPS director, a DPS deputy, a DPS trooper drove him to the scene. He worked for Uvalde ISD, so a deputy drove him to the scene. I don't know exactly what happened, but one scenario could have been he got there, he was ready to go in, and they refused to let him go in because they believed he would have compromised it all. Officers took him by the arms, drug him outside, took his gun out of his holster, and made him go home. That's to me, I've never in my life heard anything like that, but that could have happened. The other scenario is that the guy showed up, he wasn't in uniform, he wasn't prepared, and he was losing himself. That means he could be potentially losing composure because his wife had just messaged him that she's dying. And so he may have become a hazard to himself and other people. And escorting an officer don't mean it's by force. He may have voluntarily gone with a police officer outside. He knows he's distraught. The cop knows he's distraught. And typically when a cop is inoperable because of emotions.
This sounds like a red flag law. This is literally what a red flag law is.
I've seen this happen on duty before. But it's a voluntary thing that two officers understand in protecting one another. They take him outside. They see that he's now distraught. And so to protect that officer, you take his gun. He allow you to take his gun. It's not by force. And then you get him home safely and you get him the counseling and the help he needs. I have seen that play out. I've never seen
I get that situation. I'm curious.
We don't know what happened, but one or two of those happened, right?
I'm curious to see if that's actually how it was, because with all this, the gun bill that just went through the Senate, if they did take it by force, that's literally the definition of a red flag law.
But that that would be weird if they took it by force, because if he was that distraught, I think it would have taken a lot of officers to get him to give up his firearm. You know what I'm saying? Like that would have been a big scene. Like as if he was that mad or he was that crazy where they had to take his gun, they would have had to hold him or like physically restrain him. It would have had to be multiple officers. And I think that would have been the biggest news story that I've ever seen in my life, of them physically restraining another officer from going in. So I think it must have been more discreet, meaning that he was losing composure. But we don't know. Let me tell you why we don't know. And it's weird that we don't know, because I watched the hearing. The director brought it up in the hearing and nobody asked him about it. Nobody asked a follow-up question. Nobody said anything. He mentioned it and they went on. And I'm like, well, is this protocol? When you took his gun, what did he do? How did he get home? He just went home? Did you take him to jail? Like,
it doesn't add up.
Explanations.
It doesn't add up. I really hope that it's not a situation where they took his gun. I mean, I agree that a full-grown man, it's going to take a bunch of guys to get him to give up his gun if he does not want to give it up. I'm hoping that wasn't the case, but if it is the case, then it is what it is.
Let me give you some context to this as well. So the gentleman whose wife died, he was related to Arredondo through marriage. So Arredondo was the in-law of his, and Arredondo.
Oh, they're married?
No. The Arredondo and that police officer were related through marriage.
Oh, okay. I misheard you.
He was like an in-law of Arredondo. And also that lady that died in the classroom was also considered family to Arredondo. So to think that he got to the scene and they just really beat him up and took his gun. And you got to know all these guys know each other, because he was a Uvalde ISD officer. So DPS deputy wouldn't have done it to him. So I would argue that it may have been his own people, but who knows, man? I mean, we don't know. But a lot of people are speculating, and this is my own take on it, is that it may have happened in an abrupt way. It may not have. We don't know. So I think people should just say, okay, that sounds weird. I've never been a cop before. I've never seen this happen. I don't really know what happened. Let me wait until they explain this. When are they going to articulate what actually happened? Is my question.
That's the thing. So why does this whole thing continue to be portrayed as a cover-up, right? So they don't want to release the body cams. They have a private firm who's blocking that. They don't, the footage from inside the school still hasn't been shown. Obviously, they're not going to show kids being shot, but just exactly what happened, what time they moved in, what they were doing in the hallway for however long. And then why is Chief Arredondo hiding? I mean, I get that a lot of people are pissed. He's probably gotten death threats, all of that, but he's able to, in public, go out and tell his side of the story, not, have his picture taken from the Texas Tribune in secret and do a little article with him. He's allowed to publicly tell his side of the story, but it just seems like he's being a big, like, he knows, it's almost like he knows he's screwed, because if he didn't have anything to hide and he did the right thing and he did everything he could, and it was just, whatever he wants to blame it on, we didn't have radios or they weren't working, or, we had a miscommunication. I mean, none of those excuses are going to fly with anyone. But why doesn't he come out and just say either I did everything I could, this is what happened, I'm owning it, or I really screwed up? Because at the end of the day, if this comes out as they didn't know there were kids in the school, or they're blaming the whole thing about not knowing if there were kids on Arredondo, the dude should be charged. I mean, it's complete negligence. I mean, it's ridiculous.
So let me give you a couple scenarios, because the scenario of a complete cover-up could be a possibility. They could be covering it up. Now, also, let's make a distinction between Uvalde and DPS director who's handling the investigation. All of the blocking of body-worn cameras and stuff is being done by the DPS director. Senator Democrat from I think his district is Uvalde. He just sued DPS the other day because they are refusing to release the information. So that's not Uvalde, that's DPS director. Now, this could be a complete cover-up, right? The DPS have said some things that were off-colored, and I argue, or I encourage anybody to watch the entire hearing, because there were senators in that hearing who called him out for his lack of transparency and his lack of accountability on his own troopers, because he's throwing all the salt on Arredondo. However, he had 92 troopers at the scene. He has tactical experience. He's claiming that Arredondo messed up from the beginning, yet DPS didn't take over the investigation. They didn't take over incident command, and none of their troopers went in and killed the guy, knowing the active shooter training and knowing what they shouldn't done. So now, if you watch the hearing, then you will see that senators methodically broke him out and proved that he was being biased towards the DPS troopers. Now, there's another side of it. And people may not understand this. I was a public information officer, which is I was a spokesperson for the police department. So I understand how information come out. And if you rush it, you're going to get things wrong and people are going to think you're lying. So they shouldn't have come out so quickly with information, because the DPS director never showed up to the scene. He wasn't involved. And so he's given information based on what somebody else is telling him. And in a preliminary investigation,
preliminary, but he's watched all the body cam footage and done all the interviews.
No. But what I'm saying is that preliminarily, when they first came out, he shouldn't have, right? Because they didn't even have, he explained in the hearing that the FBI had to take the hallway video and enhance it in Quantico, because initially it was too grainy for them to get any information on. So that wasn't available to him when he first made a statement. He hadn't interviewed not one of the police officers in the hallway when he made his first statement. They had no understanding of who did what and where. They didn't know he was shooting inside of the school, into the classroom door. It was so many different things that they did not have information on, and he came out and made a statement. That was wrong that he did that. That was wrong that he did that. So he comes back and he comes back and he still pees the bed. In his opening statement, he said every officer was ready to go in the hallway, but Arredondo held them back. It's what he essentially said. That Arredondo put officers over children, and he did that whole spew. He contradicted everything he said in the hearing because he blamed it on Arredondo. Every body-worn camera timeline that he read, not one time did Arredondo tell anybody to stand down. He has body-worn camera of Arredondo telling the SWAT team, let's go, let's go, let's go. Not one person on DPS took a command from Arredondo. He literally contradicted himself. Not one time did Arredondo mention police officer safety. He mentioned that we don't need them to shoot through the walls because we don't want to lose more children. It's what Arredondo had said at one point. So none of what he said in his opening statement was anything that he said in the actual hearing. So it's very confusing to me.
Yeah,
his role.
I think the body cams need to be released, and I think so. Let me
touch on that. Let me touch on that body worn camera thing. There's two ways. They're covering it up, or you don't want to release stuff like this without proper investigatory context. If you haven't interviewed, this is the problem, and I think the public should understand this too. If you haven't interviewed every officer on the scene, if you don't have concrete information, you release that to the public, the officer that you didn't interview is going to now have an alibi because he know he didn't do what's right. Now he got all the information of what actually happened, and he's going to change his story to match what he think he need to say in order to get out of the mess, right? So
yeah, it's just crap though. I mean, at this point, it's kids dead. I mean, anyone who's willing to do that at this point, like if I was one of these officers and somehow screwed this up, I'd be raising my hand saying, throw me in prison, because it's a complete joke. Granted, we don't have the body cams. We don't have all of the minute details of this entire thing. But from what it sounds like is they had communication errors. They got orders from someone. Apparently, that's what's being said from Arredondo, that it's either a barricaded suspect, the door is locked.
Yep.
And so at that point, you got a bunch of officers just following orders. Now, at this point, I don't see how you're not trying to move through the school and make sure. Like, how are you not asking? To me, I don't think I would ask for permission in that situation. But how are you not relaying a question to your chief saying, Chief, should we be clearing this school? I imagine there are still kids in here. Like, we need to check, especially if shooting is not currently going on because there's no active threat.
But that's kind of what they did, right? I don't know what Arredondo and them did. They cannot even
for 77 minutes or whatever.
No. Because you got to think. People keep saying 77 minutes, but there's a lot of stuff that happened.
Or however long it was. Yeah.
So you gotta, he went in there and he shot up people before the cops got there. They get there, he shot at them for another 15 minutes sporadically. And then here's the prolonged period. So according to the evidence and according to what DPS is saying, the prolonged period is when they started to evacuate everybody. So they started breaking out windows and evacuating kids who were on the opposite side of the classroom, and they started evacuating kids on the north. And a lot of the other kids were stationed in place. Their immediate evacuation was in that school because he had already been shooting through the walls, right? So a couple of officers got shot initially, and some of those rounds were coming through the walls. So they didn't want kids in other rooms to get shot if this guy continued the shooting. So they started that particular evacuation. And it took a while, right? And so, but it didn't take an hour to do that. But that's methodically what they were doing.
I saw officers evacuating kids through windows.
Yeah.
At least that footage. There is a lot of time gap from when those first 100 shots went off to when they actually killed the guy. So I think that also needs to be put in stone exactly what happened, whether they were told to stand down, whatever it is. What is the thought process as a police officer, either not knowing for sure, right? Like, I don't know how anyone in that situation, a chief, whoever it is, can positively say there are 0 kids in this school right now. There are 0 kids, especially in an active shooter situation where they don't have the guy yet. If you're saying there are 0 kids in the school, you better be damn sure. So that part to me doesn't make sense, because I don't see how anyone in that position could just tell a whole bunch of officers, guys, there's no kids. We're going to wait until we can just shoot this guy, or until SWAT shows up, or whatever it is. To me, it's, I have a report that there are no kids. We're going to get in there, sweep every single room. No shots are being fired at the moment. No shots were fired for however long. So we're going to go in, sweep the entire school. If we see the guy, we're going to take his head off. And if there are kids, we're going to get him out. I just don't understand the time gap on.
Yeah, so, and it's reasonable. Yeah. What you're saying is reasonable, and I agree with you. Here's some context to it. They knew where he was at, because when they first got into the school, he started shooting them, and a couple officers got shot. So they were able to determine that he was in this particular area. And then, you know, so here's the thing, like, this is the confusing part, because if you show up to the scene and you say there's no shooting, so if you don't know that there was 100 rounds shot at first and you get there, you may think that this is the start of it. Like, this guy hasn't shot anybody. Nobody was shot. He's in the room. We don't know if there's kids in there or not, but he's not shooting anybody. So
I'm going to let you finish, but is that a legit excuse?
It could be, and it couldn't be. It depends on what they actually experienced. Not what we think, but what they experienced.
How do people not know? They must have talked to people when they got there. Dude, this dude's been just drilling rounds through the entire school. How do they? How is that not something that they know?
So I got context here. I got birdies, okay? And so the birdies are saying that when they first arrived, and I can't give away, when they first arrived, it was nobody said anything about shooting in the class. Nobody said anything about kids. Nobody said anything that he was shooting anywhere. People were arriving on the scene, and none of the Uvalde people or the people there ever mentioned that cops were shot. They never mentioned any of this stuff.
If that's true, that is the wildest. If this dude truly shot 100 rounds off, and nobody was like, dude, this dude's nuts.
But this is the gap here. DPS director, when he give his timeline, he always skipped this part, and it's weird to me. When he first got to the scene, nobody was there, right? When he first got there, there's a resource officer that passed him, headed to another guy he thought was a shooter. They get into he put a gun on him. I don't know if he put a gun on him, but he addressed him. He got on the radio, said, "I'm out with the suspect." Now, he didn't know that he passed the actual shooter, because the shooter was ducked behind some cars in the parking lot. So I don't know where that guy went. The DPS director, or not one senator, asked him, where did that guy go? Because after that situation happened, the kid gets up from the parking lot and he begins to fire into the school from the walkway. They don't mention where this guy's at ever. I still, to this day, I don't know what he did. Did he drive away? Was he there when the shooting was going on?
Are you talking about the guy who he originally shot at when he crashed his car?
No. He shot at people at the funeral home. I'm talking about the resource officer that showed up to the funeral home first. He was by himself. The funeral home guy said, "Hey, the suspect is right there." He drives 50 miles per hour plus through the parking lot. He gets to the car. He jumps out. He gets on the radio, according to the documents, and he says, "I'm out with the suspect." That person ended up being a teacher. The suspect is actually hiding in between cars. They don't give a timeline what happened to this resource officer. They fast forward through, saying that the kid gets up from the parking lot. He begins to shoot into the side of the school. He walks around through the west door. He goes in the classroom. He stands at the door of 111 and 112, I guess. He stands at the door. They don't know which door he actually went into, because the camera is grainy. He fires 27 rounds at the door before he ever enters the class. He goes into the class. He fires rounds in the class. He leaves the door for a little bit. He comes back in. He fire more rounds. He go across through the doors. He fire more rounds. They document that there was 100 rounds shot into both classrooms for the first 2 minutes. And then they say 3 officers show up. They go in towards where they think he's at or whatever, and they get shot. Right. Once they get shot, they retreat. Arredondo comes from the south. Now him and other officers in the hallway now. Once they get consolidated in the hallway, apparently what they're saying is that the shooting happened before any of the officers got there. So they're saying Arredondo is heard on his cell phone. They have it recorded. And they read the transcript of what he said. Is that he's now saying the guy's fired multiple rounds. Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming he's saying at the cops, he said, we only have handguns. We need reinforcements. We need SWAT. We need snipers. We got them contained. And so all of the evidence that we have verbally is they're saying that he's contained in the room as a barricaded subject. And so responding officers are now containing him in the school. Let me ask you. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. So however many officers they had, is only having handguns a real excuse for one guy with a rifle?
Let me explain. It depends. If it's an active shooter, no. If it's a barricaded subject, yes, right? So if it's an active shooter, it doesn't matter if you got a handgun or you got a pocket knife. You got to go and you got to eliminate the threat. If it's a barricaded subject, you are outgunned, you have to get more resources. This is where the problem starts. Is he misdiagnosing this as an active shooter, or is he oblivious to the fact that this guy had shot 100 rounds before they got there? That's where the problem lies.
Yeah, I just don't know where the disconnect is on like getting calls from inside the classroom and saying, hey, this dude's in here, or we got kids in here, or whatever. They're getting calls. How is that information not relayed, or was it relayed? And then I'm still on the point of, I don't care if this dude shot off 5 million rounds an hour ago and then you show up. If the dude's not dead, if he's not dead, how are you not in the school doing stuff, clearing rooms, trying to find another way in? I mean, however long the time frame was from when Arredondo called, made the call that it was a barricaded suspect, however long that time frame, I mean, that's a lot of time to figure out something. Other than just running the hell in there. I mean, that's in my mind what they should have done. I really don't care if it's a barricaded suspect or any of that. I mean, if it's kids and one of you has to be sacrificed by maybe not having the best tactical plan, but getting in there and killing the guy, fine, we're good with it.
Here's where
if it's going to save some kids.
Yeah, here's where I think the disconnect is. You and I agree 1,000%. If you show up to a school and there's shooting going on in the school, there is no way whatsoever under God that this is not an active shooter. There's no way. If you show up and you hear shooting in a school, it is an active shooter. It never ceases to be an active shooter. Full stop. There's no.
What if a parent? Right? What if people outside are telling you that they were shooting inside the school at that point? Then are you going off of your chief's? No. We think it's a barricaded suspect, or are you going off of what?
The chief doesn't matter at this point, right? Nobody's going to tell you, or they should tell you that it's a barricade. If you hear shooting or you have any indication that the shooter has been shooting at kids, it's an active shooter, full stop, no excuse. Now,
so then how is it not that then? I'm kidding. No, I don't get it.
I'm not saying that it wasn't that. What I'm saying is that here's where the complication thing happens, because we don't know. They're leaving out a big mess here, but maybe when they release the video, we'll know. If you show up to a school and you didn't hear any shooting, and you get to a classroom and a guy is shooting at you, but you don't hear any screaming, you don't hear any kids, when you try to breach the door, you're getting shot at. And you don't hear any kids or nothing. You don't think that there's kids in there. Right. A person could misinterpret that as a barricaded subject. It's the wrong interpretation, But I can see how an inexperienced Uvalde ISD chief may say, okay, he's barricaded. We can't get through the door. There's no kids in there, and he's shooting at us. We have him contained. Let's rescue the other kids. We'll bring in SWAT and we'll get in there, try to negotiate with him and kill him. That
So let me
could
ask you
be a
this.
scenario.
Yeah, no, I get you. So let me ask you this. Your view of the entire situation with what you know, do you think the police failed? Do you think if they acted quicker, had better communication based on what you've said, do you think they would have saved more kids? And if they could have, what do you think should happen to the police officers who did not act, especially the chief? Do you think they should be charged? Do you think they should be fired? What do you think?
Yeah, so from what I know now I can't speak on how many kids were rescued because I don't know how many kids survived 100 rounds in the first 2 minutes. But what I can say is that based on what I know now, they clearly misdiagnosed this incident from the very beginning.
Right.
And I think that set them down a bad path. And I use the analogy of a doctor. You go into a doctor and you're having issues with your stomach and your back is hurting. And they say, you know what, you are dehydrated. And they treat you for dehydration.
Right.
After they finish treating you, they find out that you actually had kidney stones. So everything you did from the misdiagnosis is wrong because you didn't diagnose it right. This should have been diagnosed as an active shooter in the beginning based on what we know now. And they misdiagnosed it, and everything they did was wrong because this was actually an active shooter and not a barricaded subject. Now, responsibility. Now, if the Arredondo knew and should have had reason to know this was an active shooter, and he negligently or intentionally treated it different, then he has to be held responsible for every kid that died as a result of his misconduct. I don't know
manslaughter. Manslaughter,
potentially, right? I think you could be held liable if you was negligent or you intentionally forgone or you forewent, if that's even a word, your training for whatever reason. You should be held responsible for every kid that could have been saved as a result of your actions. Now,
I think
the people responding, if they didn't know or they had a reason to not believe or whatever the case may be, then they could be absolved. If they had a reason to know, they were there while kids were getting shot, and they had reason to believe there was kids in there. Shots were going off, and they never acted. Then I think that they will be held responsible. That's kind of what it's kind of a no-brainer to me.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like
the school should be held responsible as well. Because
I'm not so much on the bandwagon of the school, because at the end of the day, I mean, they're teachers if they forget to lock a door. If there's an active shooter outside and they negligently were like, oh, there's an active shooter outside, I'm just going to prop this door open and not lock it, for sure. But I'm just not entirely sure, or whoever it is, whoever it is.
The school, because when you look at the death toll, once the death toll come out, the school was responsible for probably 90% of the deaths. Now, this is why, not the teachers, because they may not have known the doors were, well, here, let me give you this. One of the teachers put in a request to fix the door. They never fixed it. So it's not her fault. It's whoever didn't fix that door's fault. Now, the school supposed to have the door secured at all times. Whoever unlatched the door and left it unsecured was responsible for all this that happened. Now, should they be charged with first-degree murder or something? No. But the school should be held responsible for not securing the facility, which led to the first flurry of killings before cops ever got there. So cops should be held responsible for what they did, and the school district and school board or whoever else, or not the school board, but the school district itself should be held responsible for what they caused. And that's how I think the cookie should crumble.
Yeah, I think anyone who either negligently or on purpose or tactically wrong contributed to kids dying should 100% be held accountable. But at the end of the day, I mean, here's the thing. I think this thing has been extremely overcomplicated. I think they need to release body cams. I think they just need to get the actual information out there. And at the end of the day, if the excuses are, well, we had wrong information, we had, whoever it was telling us we had a barricaded suspect, we were told that the door was unlocked when it was locked when it wasn't. I mean, the whole thing about trying keys for however long seems like total BS. And then the chief needs to come out and just suck it up. He needs to come out and say there are 19 kids dead. I was in charge, right? So it's not, he's not making a phone call asking somebody, some special forces guy how to handle this. No, he's in there. He's making the calls. He needs to come out, own whatever it is, and then move on. But to me, this whole thing has been complicated beyond belief. If the dude is not dead, if you don't have confirmation that the dude is not dead, you're not stopping. You're not hanging out outside. We don't really give a shit. Two cops. If you have to pull your guns out to hold parents back, if you're truly going in and clearing and trying to kill the guy, fine. I'm fine with that, just to keep them out of the crossfire. But if you're in there trying to decide what to do, trying to figure out if the shield is the right shield, if we have the right shooters, if we have this, if we have that, to me, that's just a total botched situation that 100% should result in somebody's got to have a manslaughter charge here for all the kids.
Let me say, this is kind of, I think the situation should be very simplified, right? The DPS director should have came out and said the school failed the kids. They failed to protect them. The police officers failed to respond properly to protect the kids as well. That's very clear across the board. The DPS director should say that they falsely or inappropriately identified this as a barricaded subject, which resulted in them doing the wrong thing the entire time. And this incident went south. There's no way that you are going to nitpick the response when this wasn't the response they made. Like, if the person is, I don't know why Arredondo believed this was a barricaded, but just say he did. The barricaded subject scenario played out to perfection. If this was actually a barricaded subject, Arredondo and the cops that were there, they performed perfectly in a barricaded subject situation. But this wasn't a barricaded subject. This man had killed kids. Some kids probably were still alive. This should have been an active shooter. The problem is that they're judging the active shooter response when they actually were doing a barricaded subject response. So everything they did is wrong. You can't say they brought shields up. Why didn't they go in? Because nobody was interpreting this properly. So they didn't expect to go in.
Yeah.
The
dude should be charged then. I mean, if he fucked it up that bad to the point where if he got this much stuff wrong, like barricaded suspect instead of active shooter, door is locked when he just had no idea. They never tried the door according to the body cams or the DPS director. If you're not 100% sure that all the kids are out, like there is no excuse for not getting your ass in there.
See, I agree. And see, but people like the comment that's right there is I want people to be smart about what they're saying. They said Officer Tatum is blaming the school. Now think about this for a minute. Before cops got there, right? Let's blame everything on the police when they got there, right? Everything is their responsibility. When they show up, they own it.
Right.
Now, before they got there, can you blame the police for things that happened before they got there?
Absolutely not.
The answer is no. So now the question is, how many children died before the cops got there? Because he unloaded 100 rounds into the classroom before the cops got there.
That's just, to me, that's a dangerous place to go, because if
one more
kid, no, it is true. But if one more kid died after based on the wrong calls,
then it's the police fault. Right?
Yeah, they're screwed. But yeah, I mean,
not
I'm
every
sure
kid,
kids
right,
died.
Not every kid. Like, just say hypothetically,
not
say
every
3
kid.
people. Just say everybody died in the classroom except 3 people. Those 3 people could have been saved if cops would have responded properly. I think it's fair to say those 3 lives, or it's the cops have to own it. Now, I don't care what the excuse is.
Right.
if those 3 people were bleeding out in that classroom and died as a result of police response, the police have to own it. Now, the other 19 children that died before cops got there, who has to own that?
Well, I think, yeah. I mean, if the school truly was not locked down, that's on them. But at the same time, they don't. Did anyone in the school have a gun? If you don't have a gun up against a gun, you're screwed. I mean,
and if you have a handgun in regular body armor against an AR, you're not gonna. It's gonna be a bad day for you.
If you have more training than a guy with an AR and you have body armor and a handgun, I'm pretty sure a bunch of cops would be able to take him out before he would be able to take all of them out.
Let me explain this. In a hallway, yes. If they have to come through a doorway, no. Because you can only fit one officer at a time through a doorway for the most part. If this kid sits back, I'm just saying hypothetically.
It's CQB, yeah. One of them's probably going to get shot, but
no, they all gonna, no. They're now you got to understand this classroom is completely black, right? Because they turn all the lights out in the classroom for active shooter drills. They turn all the lights out, so this class is completely
12
black.
o'clock. There's got to be some light in there.
No.
From
they had now it may be some light, but according to what I know, they had curtains over the windows. And then it was blacked out in the classroom, and he was wearing all black. Now, it's a risk that you should take. Let me give you an example. If the the door is open, right? You see it open, and the guy's shooting kids in there. That's a risk that you take. You go in with your handgun, and you do the best you can. Now, the chances of you winning that fight, if the kid has prejudged you coming through the door, is very minimal. That 223 at an angle where cops are running in like this, you have no chance. You have a very rare chance. So I'm not saying you shouldn't, because I've gone to plenty of calls that we thought were active shooters, and I didn't have a rifle with me. I had my handgun. And you got to go, you got to do the best you can. You throw up prayers and you pull the trigger on the guy. Hopefully you're a better shot. But I'm just speaking of like a tactical response. Let's say that this wasn't an active shooter situation. You can't. You got to be more strategic, right? If it's not active shooter, if this
100%. But what if somebody outside? So if they know he's in a certain classroom and they got a bunch of officers outside, right? So they don't want to just storm straight in because he's just going to sit there and mow them all down, right? But if they know what classroom he's in, that means they know what windows outside are for that classroom. So, they're saying their radios didn't work. I don't.
It's proven that their radio. It's proven that their radio.
If it's proven, get your damn cell phone out. Have somebody on a cell phone with somebody outside saying, "Hey, I'm going to make some noise or do something outside." As soon as I do that, you get in there, take some cover, and
here's the problem.
I mean, there's got to be something more than just we're going to wait. And because he's barricaded, there's got to be something. If they're kids,
here's the problem. If the door is open and they know it's open, what you said is 100% correct. You distract them, you go in and you shoot them to death. If the door,
but you can open a door.
No. If the door is locked,
it wasn't locked though.
No. But we know now that it wasn't locked. Every door in the school is locked. That door had a malfunction that nobody knew about, right? At least the cops didn't know about. So just hypothetically speaking, if the door is locked, like they perceived it to be, which it should have been, there's no reason to believe that the door was unlocked, because you can't lock the door or unlock it from the inside. They're all locked according to policy. And so the door should be locked, right? But if, just hypothetically speaking, if the door is locked, just say if it's an active shooter situation and the door is locked, that's when you have a problem, right? That's when you have a problem, because you may want to run in, but you can't open that door. You're not going to be able to open a door. And this is
that's
where
not this. That's not this situation though. They didn't try to open. It was the
situation.
They didn't try to open the door.
Well, because they got shot at first. When they first approached the door, they got shot. And
right,
so,
but that's two guys. You have to continue to try. It's your job.
No.
Right.
I get what you're saying, but let's look at both sides. Yes, continue to press forward. Try to go to a locked door that you believe is locked. You have no breaching tools. You have no key. Go to the door, get shot in front of the door, and maybe somebody will tell your wife you love them. But I can see how
I'm not trying to call you out on this, dude, but what I'm saying is you keep going back to thinking the door is locked. That is not a
why
valid
would they believe the
argument.
door is not locked?
But if you don't try it,
They went to the door and got
there's no
shot.
excuse. What's that?
No, listen. They went to the door. Now think about this. Uvalde ISD officers, Uvalde PD officers show up to the scene.
Right.
The doors to the school, based on any school in the district, the requirement is that every door is locked. The teachers can't unlock the doors. The doors are locked permanently.
Gotcha.
This door happened to have a malfunction. So if you work for Uvalde ISD, you work for the PD, you know that the doors are locked. So it's reasonable to believe that the door may be locked. In hindsight, they should have tried the door, but just hypothetically speaking, if the doors were functioning like they supposed to, and like every other door in the building, then you will be running into a really difficult situation. If you run to the door and you can't get it open, what do you do then? That's the hard question.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, there had to have been a something else they could have done, like got on a cell phone, have one of your guys on a cell phone relaying information, have somebody get on the outside, create
but they need
some
to be able
sort
to breach
of
the door. They have to be able to breach the door in order to make any
I
of that
get
possible.
that, but in that situation, they didn't have to because it was unlocked.
Well, they don't know that.
But they didn't try. Like, man,
But
there's no
the risk reward is the balance here, right? If you believe that the door is locked, you have every reason to believe the door is locked. Every door in the building is locked.
Here's one thing I'll challenge you on, though.
There's a risk.
Just real quick. You can check if a door is unlocked without opening the door. You can do it very quietly too.
No. The guy. So what happened was, while he was shooting, he realized that the cops had came in. He saw him come in through the window. It's supposedly what they said. So when they began to approach the door, he started shooting them through the door, the window of the door, and also the walls. The bullets were going through the walls. And so 3 of the officers were struck by gunfire initially. So I'm just trying to
way in the beginning, right?
This was the first action that happened.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, all I'm saying, man, I mean, I get your points.
But you have to see from both sides. You can say, yeah, they should have tried the door. But you can also say, I see why they didn't just walk in front of the door like that.
No, absolutely. You're not going to walk in front of a door if the dude's just shooting at the door. But when it stops,
and you believe it's locked,
right? But when the shooting stops, you can get under the part where he can't see you through the window of the door, or whatever it was. I don't know how big the window was, but and try it, right? I mean, that part to me is just, it's so dumb. It's like,
you can see both, right? You could say that could be an option that could be an option that they used, right? I mean, I agree to that. Could they have done that? Yes. But can't you see why they may not have done that?
I mean, this entire situation, no. I mean, at that point, you're trying everything. You're literally trying everything. If they did not try the doorknob, there is no excuse. If you're waiting that long, right? So if it's from when the first couple of guys got shot to when they killed them, if they didn't try the door once in that entire time period, yeah, there's no excuse for that. I don't care if Batman's holding down all the doors and they know he's just going to be stationed everywhere. You try the damn doorknob. Like that part's
you can.
No,
but
dude.
I see, the thing about me is that I can see how you make that argument. I can see how one would come to that conclusion. I can also see why it would not be reasonable to try the door.
Yeah, I mean, originally when he's shooting, like if he's shooting at the door, don't try the door when he's shooting at the door. But when it stops, and he did stop for a long time because they thought he was barricaded. If you think he's barricaded, get under the window and try to mess with the door. Try to pick it. Do something. No, I mean,
but you don't know. But the thing is, here's the reality of it to a certain degree. So I get that. Somebody can argue that maybe they should have done that. But I also see why a person wouldn't in real life, if you don't have any protection, you don't have a shield, you don't have no protection. You walk to that door, he could be standing at the door the whole time. And when you wiggle that door, you know, your chances of surviving that just to try to play with a door that's locked is going to really, it's not going to yield the benefit, right? If you know that the doors are fickle, meaning that some of them may be locked, some of them may not be locked, then I can see there being more of an urgency to say you need to try the door because they may be unlocked. If you are under the impression that all these doors are locked, which is mandated, the door was actually locked. It just had a throw malfunction. The door was actually locked. You know,
so earlier in the I get it. So earlier in the conversation, you said that if police hear any kind of shooting, it's an active shooter. It's not a barricaded subject, right? So if police were shot in this hallway, how did it go from an active shooter at that point, there are wounded officers, to now a barricaded suspect? It's not. You said once it's an active shooter, it's an active shooter.
No. Let me give you two scenarios. If there's kids in the classroom, shooting occurs, it's an active shooter no matter what happens, right? It never stops being an active shooter. Just because a person is shooting you doesn't make them an active shooter, right? Because let's give a hypothetical. Let's say that there was no kids in the classroom at all. Mm-hmm. If the guy was in the classroom by himself because he barricaded himself, no kids in the classroom, he barricaded himself in there, and he started shooting at cops, he's not an active shooter, right? He's not an active shooter because the kids are evacuating. He's lone in a room. He's actually a barricaded subject at that point because there's no risk of life. You don't need to rush in. Maybe you can negotiate with him. Maybe you need to do an extraction. But just because he's shooting at the cops, and if there's no kids in the classroom, that's not an active shooter. If he's shooting and there's kids in the classroom or kids that are in danger, it's an active shooter, if that makes sense. So
no, for sure.
Just say the guy came in your house and you called the police and you said, "Hey, cops, a guy just broke in my house," and you hang up the phone. The cops get there and they receiving gunfire from the bedroom door. Now they have to make a decision. If they know you guys are in there, then they have to treat it like an active shooter. They got to go and extract you. If they don't know if you guys are in there, they have no reason to believe you in there. They are perceived that he's isolated in the room and they don't need to act right away. Or if you guys are in there and they have reason to believe that you're hostages and he's not actively shooting you guys. No, then that's a different approach.
That doesn't happen in Texas. They just put them in a bag if they try to break in.
Well, no, it's just different, man. We've had guys.
I get what you're saying.
Had a guy,
but
let me give you an example of what we did on our police department. This guy was supposedly we didn't know if he murdered his wife. We know he was holding his wife hostage. He's firing multiple shots at police officers. I'm talking about he is hundreds of shots he's firing at police officers. All the cops are taking cover. We don't know if he killed his wife or not, but we know she's in the house.
Right.
We treated that like a barricaded subject because he may have her hostage. He's shooting at us to keep us back. We don't want to really provoke this guy, and then he end up shooting his wife and killing him. All the information we had is that she was a hostage. Now we got SWAT team there. We got our shields there. We got our sniper. They ended up throwing the phone in there. He's negotiating. And then he popped his head up and they blew his head off. So, gotcha. But then once we went in, we found out that he actually had already killed his wife a long time ago. Waddy. You know, so there's a differing of situations.
No, I get you. I mean, you're definitely giving these guys the benefit of the doubt. I mean, I'm
not giving them benefit of the doubt. I'm just saying that I don't know.
I get.
So how am I
going
to judge them based on what I don't know?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think they just need to release the body cam footage. And you know, at the end of the day, whatever the excuse is, if it's extremely negligent, which it sounds like it is, whether it was just somebody made a bad call or they just, you know, botched the entire thing, I think somebody should be charged. I think Chief Arredondo, I mean, just the way they've handled it. I mean, they swarm into city council privately
No, but
like a week after. It's like, what kind of crap is that, man?
Let me explain that. See, this is where the rumors get flowing. So according to the mayor, there's a specific date where they have to swear in all of their elected officials. It's normally a public scenario, but they did not want to make it public given the fact that the kids had died. So they just swore them in without making a public ceremony. So not only was Arredondo sworn in, there was a lot of other people who were sworn in that won the election, according to the mayor. So it does make sense that they did make it a public display, given the fact that these kids had just got murdered and families are grieving in the area.
But wait, I mean, it's
no, but they have to swear all their public officials in on a certain date. Is what?
Yeah, but he's not doing anything. He tried to get paid leave. I mean, he's not going to be doing anything for a while until this whole thing's figured out. I mean, just the fact that they did it.
No, but do they not swear him in and swear everybody else in?
Do they swear everybody else in but him? It depends on what his role is. I mean, if it's not
he was elected city council member.
I doubt they would reelect that guy at this point. I mean,
because people have smeared him. I mean, people have smeared him.
Well,
we really don't know. We really don't know what the dude really did. Now, it appears that he lied about. But this is another thing. I don't know who to believe.
The whole key thing in the interview, I think, is going to come back to bite his ass. Because
I think if that's fine, it's the trying the door is going to bite him. He said he tried the door and another officer tried the door. The DPS director came out and said nobody tried the door. So
right, nobody tried the door, and he said he was trying keys for 70-something minutes. And then he said, or however long it was, he said he was trying keys for a while. And then he said that he was praying that one of them would work. He like added that part in. It's like, dude, like if the door is not locked and you're sitting there trying keys, like how fucking dumb are you? Like it just doesn't.
I get what you're saying, but that's not going to go into evaluation because so the thing is that they believe they need a key or a breaching tool to get into the classroom, right? Now we know that the thing could have been open. They didn't know. They didn't have a reason.
How do you logically try a key in a door though without trying to turn the handle?
No. He wasn't trying to key in the actual door. He was so this is how it works. I don't know why Uvalde PD don't have master keys, but for whatever reason, the Uvalde ISD didn't have master keys. Now, once the school go on lockdown, it's almost impossible to find a janitor and all these other places. So eventually they got a hold of the janitor. They were able to get master keys. Now, according to the hearing, there's multiple master keys. So he was trying keys in another classroom door that's locked. And so he's trying to find which master key will open the doors so he can find the key, give it to the team, they can open the door and go in. According to the documents, the guy gave him the wrong key, and then there's not one key, there's multiple master keys, and so it took a while for that to transpire. I'm not saying that he's right or wrong for it. I'm just explaining what actually happened.
What about shooting the lockout? You can do that from way on the side and not be in the line of fire of the guy. I mean, this is
a possibility, but is it probable,
I understand, right? But all I'm saying is if you don't want to try the doorknob and you're waiting for an extended period of time and you're not sure if all the kids are out, you're not sure if the dude is dead, you're not sure if he's barricaded or still shooting or whatever it is, there has to be a progression of what you're doing in there. Otherwise, you're just sitting there like I can't confidently say exactly what they were doing, but it wasn't, all right, guys, give us 5 minutes. We're going to figure out a really good plan between us 5 or 6 on what to do. If one of us goes down, it's for the kids. Like, to me,
but this is the thing, dude. This is the thing that we're missing. You are 100% right if they knew that there were kids in there. The thing is that
how do you make that judgment call though? If you don't know for sure.
If you show up to the scene and there's no shooting and no noise, what are you to think though? Maybe because this is why
I would think it's a school, and if I don't have confirmation every kid is accounted for, I'm going in there thinking that there are still kids.
But this is the problem with that, right? Just let's give a hypothetical. And I'm not saying who right or wrong. I'm just saying
Right.
I want people
Yeah.
to think about this. So just say that you show up, you hear no screaming, you hear no shooting, nothing. So you think that you're joining this, and this is what has been happening before you got there. So you say, okay, he's in the classroom. There's no shooting going on. So two things pop in your mind. Are there kids in there? And is he barricading himself with hostages? These are two things that you have to consider. Now, let's do a hypothetical. Let's say that there are kids in there who's barricaded and he's holding them hostage. The cops say, we're going to go in there and kill this guy because there may be kids in there. They go to try to breach the door, and he actively start picking off a kid one at a time. They're going to blame the cops.
Yeah, I mean, I get that, but the logic there, though, if he had already shot off 100 rounds, is not there for that. He wouldn't have stopped and just said, "All right, I shot 19. I'm going to leave 3."
But we're talking about two separate situations. I'm saying if you show up to the scene and you don't know that there was shooting, when you get there, is no shooting, no crying, no screaming, no nothing, and you are under the impression that this is a barricaded person when you get there. And nobody has told you anything different when you get there. Now, what if there is kids in there and he's barricading himself and he has them as hostages? And let's say you treat it as a barricaded subject if the guy's not shooting anybody. Let's say you're able to get communication with him, and then you get a hostage negotiator, and then he finally lets the kids go through negotiation. That will be optimal. So it gets complicated because if it's an active shooter and you know he's shooting kids, you got to go. You got to go. There's no excuses. There's no questions. You may have to be methodical. You may have to start knocking at windows. You may have to start at least trying a door. There's a few things that you may have to do if it's an active shooter. If it's a barricaded subject and you believe that, then you have to do a different course of action.
Yeah, no, I get you. I mean, we can sit here and talk what ifs all day. I mean, at the end of the day, all of just the facts need to come out about this. The way it looks is absolutely terrible. I mean, I think the chief should for sure be charged. I think just this entire thing is just it's a sad display of policing, no matter how you look at it. I mean, it was botched. And granted, whatever information they had, I mean, I'm still going to stick to the plan of if you are not 100% sure the guy's dead, if you're not 100% sure all the kids are out, if you're not 100% sure, the door is locked, we can go over all the facts. There's more that can be done. So
can we agree on this point, right? That it was botched.
Yeah.
Can we agree on that point?
Absolutely. Well, I think botched is being nice. I mean, if kids are dead because of their fuck up or communication,
maybe they aren't,
or whatever it is.
But we don't know if we don't really know that right now, but we could say that they botched their response because we don't know how many kids lived. We don't know how many kids lived or how many kids would have lived. So right now we do know that it was botched. However it got to the botched point, it was botched. There were kids in there and they didn't interpret it that way. Right. They botched it. I think that was fine. I think that the school failed. Can we agree on the school failed by not making sure their school was securable?
Yeah, if it wasn't locked down, or whatever issue they had with getting it locked down, they totally screwed up.
Yeah, because but we agree though. I think we disagree on nuance, but I think at the end of the day, I think we agree. I think people should be held accountable. I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, I think we disagree on the tactics and response. I mean, I think you're looking at it in a way of, just perfect, like police. If it's a barricaded suspect, if it's this, if it's that. But at the end of the day, none of that shit really matters because the communication in order to get to that point was completely wrong, apparently. I mean, if that's truly what it is, or if there's more stuff that comes out, to me, if there is any doubt, like that's where I'm going. If there's any doubt that there are still kids in there, that the dude is still alive, the dude, whatever, like there should have been just get in there and try something. If we, like I said, if we lose a guy trying to get in the door, it is what it is. They're still kids. So that's the part that we disagree on. I mean, all of the what ifs, we can do what ifs all day. But you know,
I think it's an unfair characterization of how I feel. What I'm saying is that I have no idea what they did. I'm just basing it on what I know now, and I'm giving them what I would call the benefit of the doubt until I have a reason to believe anything different. Like, I don't know what they knew, and neither we don't know what they knew. And I'm saying, which one is more reasonable? Maybe maybe something else was going on there, because it's not as reasonable to think that you got the baddest tactical team in America that's probably killed several suspects like this that are just sitting in a hallway. And they know kids are getting killed. Like, if you use that scenario, you say the baddest dudes in America, the baddest tactical team in the country, they have rifles, they have well, you know, eventually they got rifle shields. They're the baddest team, and I guarantee you that Bortak has killed several people already in way more dramatic situations than this. To think that they're sitting there while kids are dying, I think is less likely than saying what really happened there, because something must be missing.
I mean, like I said, I don't think we agree on the tactics involved. I think they should have just honestly just got in there. I think it's been explained through the media as super complicated, but dude, I really appreciate you coming on. This has been a great conversation. My camera's about to die here. So
good, man, because I need to get off here, because I'll talk you to death, man. So.
Yeah, but hey, man, I really appreciate you coming on. Glad to hear your opinion, and hopefully we'll get some body cam footage or just the straight truth on this thing. So
perfect. And tomorrow I'm gonna do a live stream where I'm gonna go through the hearing, and I already have the timestamps, and I'm gonna go through the hearing and just describe, because people may not have watched it, so I'm gonna go through and do it methodically. But I appreciate you having me on, man. I respect you. We may agree to disagree, but at the end of the day, you know, I don't hold no grudge against you or nothing. You know,
no, for sure. I mean,
it's an opinion, and I respect your opinion.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, my camera did that. I switched over to my computer one. But
all right, man. Get off here, man. I appreciate it.
All right, man. Take care. Thanks, everyone.